Good afternoon. Here today to talk about CBDCs and sound money solutions. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I'll give you a quick background. Usually when people wind up in crypto or the liberty movement, they're radicalized by something. And so I like to define my life in terms of 3 different periods of radicalization. The first period of radicalization was, I was that guy in high school that started an Ayn Rand club, and then dropped out of college, started my first company, thinking that, we have free market capitalism in the United States. And after spending time meeting with 150 VCs in Wall Street, that illusion was shattered. So Ayn Rand's vision of capitalism is not what I found in the US. The second period of radicalization was I started my second company in the healthcare space, which was a successful, profitable company with clients in 43 states. And it was destroyed by Obamacare, Dodd-Frank, and Attorney General Eric Holder. But unlike a lot of my friends today, I wasn't specifically targeted. Nobody knew my business had been destroyed. I was literally just collateral damage. So at that point, with the second radicalization, my view was government's just incompetent. And so I moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, which is a movement you guys are probably familiar with, to get liberty people to move to New Hampshire and to make New Hampshire the liberty beacon on the planet. I got heavily involved in politics and then realized after a number of years of doing that politics isn't the solution. We need to exit and build. And so I stopped using a bank account, started living completely off of alternative assets, and then I saw that my friends were being targeted by the federal government and arrested. And so that was my third period of radicalization. And I went to look into, after COVID tyranny and after seeing my friends thrown in prison, what is the source of this? What's going on? And what I realized is this entire crackdown on crypto is designed to usher in CBDCs without competition. So I wrote a book, I even ran for president, specifically to raise awareness on this issue, not believing that I would be elected or wanting to be elected. And I've been going around the country teaching people how to live on alternative assets. And I do want to say a few things. Since I started this process, when I originally started this, Ian wasn't in prison. In fact, I was talking to him about CBDCs, about my book, about this concept. And my wife and I, she's my better half in the back, actually attended his sentencing hearing on 9/11 of all dates last year. And before we attended this, I actually reached out to Roger Ver. And I said, hey Roger, can you help promote this? We want a packed courtroom. And so he wrote this tweet. The man who first told me about Bitcoin is about to be sentenced to federal prison for victimless crimes. If you're in New Hampshire, please show up in person and support him. Ian was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. And now Roger's facing 109 years in federal prison just 7 months after writing this tweet. I then interviewed a guy named Steven Nerioff. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a lawyer and an entrepreneur and an inventor. He actually developed the legal contract for the ICO, the security token offering. He was one of the founders of Ethereum and actually had Vitalik staying at his house. Found some inappropriate things between Ethereum and Consensus and the SEC. And then one day, the FBI shows up, 12 FBI agents, they arrest him, throw him in a van, show him a list of 2 pages of people, and said, if you don't find us information that leads to convictions on some of these people, you'll never see your children again. Some of the people on that list, Roger Ver, Naomi Brockwell, Patrick Byrne, Bruce Fenton. I mean, this list was the intersection of pro-liberty and pro-cryptocurrency.
Did he share that before Roger was arrested?
Yes, I interviewed Steven 2 weeks after I interviewed Roger, which was 1 week before he got arrested. So Roger can't be here today, and he can't speak today, but he didn't want to convey, he can't speak for himself at the moment. He needs us to be his voice, and with our help, he might be able to join us in person next year. I've taken a big interest on this. You've been following me on social media. There's a big effort to try to get Roger pardoned along with Ross. And so this is a critical effort that we need to push a lot of interest and exposure around before the inauguration. So this is, if you want to scan this QR code, this is an article that I just had published in Zero Hedge, where I outlined the details of Roger's case. So if you want to check that out, it goes into all the detail of not only the case, but also who Roger is as a person, because as you can imagine, the mainstream media is painting him out in a less than charitable light. And I'll let you go scan that. And then lastly, there's a big initiative. You can go to freerogernow.org. That's also a QR code that links to freerogernow.org. There's an open letter that you can sign, similar to what was done with Ross Ulbricht. And you know, a lot of people say, well, these petitions don't work, they don't mean anything. But actually, I talked to Lynn Ulbricht, and it had a significant impact on why Trump has at least stated that he's going to commute Ross's statement, or sentence, excuse me. So we want to make a big push around Roger's case and get as many people as possible to not only sign this open letter, but also starting next week, if you're willing to help share social media posts and to help get the word out, that would be greatly appreciated. So I wasn't planning on talking about that. Unfortunately, this is the situation that we're in. And again, it's 109 years. Roger, a few points about the case. Roger paid his taxes. Roger left the United States, and I know a lot of you aren't in the United States. You might say, well, who cares? He actually paid his taxes, hired lawyers, hired accountants, paid his exit tax when nobody was paying taxes in 2014. Nobody even knew how to classify Bitcoin. Mt. Gox had just collapsed. He still went out of his way to try to pay the taxes. Then they come after him 10 years later and say, well, you didn't pay enough, but we're not going to tell you how much you owe, and we're not going to give you an opportunity to settle. So he's been in Spain. He was thrown in the same prison John McAfee was in. McAfee was there for 8 months. He exhausted all of his appeals and then died after failing on the last attempt. Roger's been in Spain for 6 months. He's not in prison, he's out on bail, but this is not a good situation, and I encourage everybody to help amplify this as much as possible. So now to the good news. So, again, to me, all of this crackdown is about CBDCs. So what is a CBDC? And when I started this process, and I started looking into this, there were 35 countries researching the CBDC in 2020. Just researching. Maybe China was doing a little bit of work on pilots. Fast forward to 2024, 134 countries representing 98% of the global GDP are working on the CBDC. 64 of those are beyond the research phase. So then I got to thinking, okay, well, what is a CBDC? Like, what is the actual definition of a CBDC? Because, of course, given that I wrote a book about this and I'm interviewed about this all the time, that's one of the first things people ask me. And then after thinking about it for a while, I realized, well, there really isn't a common definition. The UN has a different definition than the WEF, that has a different definition than the Bank of International Settlements, and politicians have different definitions. Well, to me, what I've realized is we already have a central bank digital currency. Basically, the dollar is just an entry in a database. The way money is created is the federal government issues an IOU to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve creates an entry in an Oracle database. It is, by definition, a central bank digital currency. So there are a lot of misconceptions. People say, well, in order for it to be a CBDC, you have to have an account directly with the Federal Reserve. There have been 8 CBDCs launched. None of them actually work that way. There's nothing about the definition of a CBDC that says you can't still have commercial banks. Usually you still have a CBDC issued by a central bank to a commercial bank, and then the commercial bank goes and continues doing their fraudulent activities backed by the CBDC. Then people say, well, you can't have a CBDC alongside cash. That's not true. There's nothing that says you can't have a CBDC and cash. And in fact, the way I look at cash is just a paper token representing a database entry. And as you'll see, there's, a little bit further in this, there's some surveillance technology being added that will really reinforce that view. There's also nothing that says CBDCs have to use a blockchain. The Federal Reserve uses an Oracle database. Most commercial banks either use an Oracle database or a Microsoft database. Well, it turns out Microsoft and Oracle databases are programmable. So again, there's nothing in the definition that says it even has to have a blockchain. And then people will say, well, yes, but you still have these commercial banks creating money out of thin air. It's not just the central bank. Well, who owns the central bank? At least we think that the owner of the central bank are the largest banks. And so this idea that somehow it's magical that we have commercial banks and a central bank operating alongside one another, that doesn't really change the definition, nor does it change the impact, which is that we already have a CBDC. This is a list of some of the things that are being used, some of the technologies being deployed to actually track physical cash. Everything from RFID tags to nano tagging, fluorescent markers, there are already serial numbers, and cash recycling machines that track the fiat. So then people say, well, one of the concerns that we have with CBDCs is programmability. Everybody talks about, I'm worried about my spending being controlled, I'm worried about being tracked, I'm worried about my behavior being modified or being censored. Well, if anybody's ever used a health savings account or a flexible spending account for healthcare purchases, it's programmable money using the existing system. The largest provider of health savings accounts is Optum Bank. It is a bank. What does the bank do? They issue a debit card that you can only spend for pre-approved healthcare items at certain merchants at certain times. It is programmable money. There doesn't need to be a major technological change to have programmable money. It's already programmable. This is one of the most horrifying things I've seen of all, and I'll tie this in a little bit later. There's a Doconomy MasterCard. This is something that people voluntarily signed up for between 2019 and 2022. It is a credit card that tracks the carbon of your purchases and shuts off if you use too much carbon. People are voluntarily signing up for this. They did this for 3 years, and the program hasn't stopped. MasterCard is adding more merchants. You can see the MasterCard partner list. It's 150 companies. It's the who's who of the WEF partner companies. So then people say, and politicians on both sides of the aisle say, we don't want CBDCs because of surveillance. We're worried about Americans' privacy being violated. And everybody from Ted Cruz to Cynthia Loomis to Elizabeth Warren, they all say the same thing. Why don't they address the 13 existing programs that are used to track our financial transactions in the United States? The IRS is using AI in conjunction with banks to track our financial transactions. The NSA is doing bulk data collection of our financial transactions. Through the Patriot Act, they can come in, halt your bank account, and then issue a national security letter where you can't talk to anybody about it, including a lawyer. So I can't tell you how many cases of this there are, but this is going on today. Those are just 3 of the 13. So the way I look at it now is we already have a CBDC. It's just kind of, 50 shades of CBDC is kind of the way that I look at it. I'm putting together a CBDC tyranny index where, it can get worse. Yes, our money now is 92% digital. It's tracked. It's programmable, but we still have cash. We still have crypto. We still have some of these other features. So it can get much worse. I consider our current stage to be bondage, moving up to servitude, and then finally complete and total digital slavery. Complete total digital slavery is a global digital currency backed by energy credits tied to a social credit system where there's no cash and no crypto alternative. That is the end goal that they're moving to. And it's critically important to understand that they have malicious intent. So many people ascribe, ignorance and incompetence to what they're doing. This is a multi-decade long strategy to implement a complete control system. Ray knows. They're not hiding it. They don't hide any of this. And I put a lot of this stuff in my book. I use them as primary reference sources. You don't even have to consult anybody or talk about conspiracy theories. They think that we're so unable to stop this that they just brazenly put it out up front. Here's the World Government Summit. And so there are essentially 2 competing worldviews here. Do we want a world built on centralization, determinism, fear and manufactured scarcity, or do we want one built on decentralization, free will, love, and abundance? Those are the stakes. That's exactly what we're facing. And I'll try to go through this somewhat quickly, but this idea of a technocracy, where elites pick scientists and engineers to make decisions for everyone, dates back to 1919. There was even a movement called Technocracy Inc. They would dress up like this. They looked like Nazis. They had their own color, Technocracy Gray. They had their own salutes. GM actually manufactured a paint color for these guys. And it still exists. And if I had to boil down what technocracy is in one short statement, it is to convert the economic system from a price-based system to an energy credit-based system. They've been talking about this since 1933. So when I show you the economy MasterCard backed by carbon credits, literally this is something that they've been working on for 90 years. There are a number of organizations behind the scenes. I'm not going to go into all of them, Bilderberg, Club of Rome, etc. But understand this is well-coordinated, well-financed, and it's always had this intention of global government. From back before the founding of the UN, you had H.G. Wells, who said countless people will hate the New World Order and will die protesting against it. Julian Huxley, who was the first director of UNESCO, political unification and some sort of world government will be required. We all know about Klaus Schwab, and then you can even dig into these Yuval Harari quotes where he says, the era of free will is over. Or Brzezinski, who said, today it's infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. These people are serious. These are the front-facing groups that push this with our tax dollars. The UN, the World Bank, the IMF, the WEF, Bank of International Settlements. And to put some of this in perspective in terms of scale, these organizations employ 35,000 people and have an annual budget of $60 billion. So they're promoting this tyranny agenda that we're funding. But then look at the WEF. The WEF has over 1,000 partner companies. The top 10 WEF partner companies have a combined market cap of over $9 trillion, have $1.5 trillion of cash on hand, and employ 6 million people. So this is who we're up against. And at the end, one digital currency backed by energy credits tied to a social credit system. What does a social credit system look like? The 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals tied to digital money. When are they planning on doing this? 2030. We have 5 years. It doesn't start in 2030, it started in 2015. And they met just recently. I know Derek has covered this, I see him there. They just announced they're accelerating their timetable on these items. So what's the global state? As I mentioned, there are already, and you can see, actually, I don't know if you see, okay. This is the growth by stage of CBDC projects, according to the various countries. So 11 countries total have launched the CBDC. Some of those have been taken back and moved to a pilot stage, but it's increasing. Just the EU even announced today that accelerating their plans for a digital euro. Let me see how. All right, here we go. So the US is very aggressive on CBDCs. People don't realize this. We had FedNow that was launched July of last year, which is a real-time payment system between banks. It's not a CBDC itself, but it's an infrastructure for a CBDC. Project Cedar is a CBDC pilot for wholesale CBDCs for cross-border payments. Who's involved? MIT, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, 5 of the largest banks in New York, the Bank for International Settlements. Project Hamilton, which is the retail CBDC project. And this should really alarm people. Because a lot of people say to me, oh, this is like the government can never launch something like this. It'll be like Obamacare. The government isn't doing this. It's the largest banks in the world funding the best development talent in the world. There are Bitcoin devs working on these US CBDC pilots. Huh? Who? Who or boo? Boo. Well, the Project Hamilton started in 2019. It can do 1.8 million transactions per second. Corey Fields is the Bitcoin developer who is a co-author of the Project Hamilton white paper. He worked on Lightning Network and SegWit, and he's literally a co-author. MIT has funded all 3 US CBDC pilots. Joy Ito, who runs that group at MIT, took funding from Jeffrey Epstein. You couldn't make this stuff up. Then there's Regulated Liability Network. Regulated Liability Network is a platform where all CBDCs will be registered. You will register all of your assets, non-monetary assets, stocks, bonds, your house, and it will be put on a common platform with CBDCs because you will only be able to settle transactions using CBDCs. So you will have a control system where everything can be monitored, programmed, and censored. Not just money, but all of our assets digitized on the same control system. And the thing is, Regulated Liability Network isn't just something the US is working on. Japan has a Regulated Liability Network. Europe has one. The UK has one. And they're developing these in a way to interoperate. What does this mean? At the end, one platform where all global assets are digitized and centrally controlled. So when people in crypto talk about tokenization, they think about, so many people say to me, why do you care about tokens? Who cares about tokenization? It's failed. Literally everything is going to be tokenized. Just because people in crypto have decided to focus on NFTs and meme coins, we're doing that while they're figuring out how to tokenize everything on the planet, including tokenizing human beings, which is what contact tracing was during COVID. I had this interaction with a developer at the Federal Reserve of New York who actually worked on some of these projects. He says when they roll out the new retail CBDC, they're going to do it at the same time as Regulated Liability Network. This is the plan. There are already now more CBDC accounts globally than crypto accounts. Not that they're particularly active, but people should be alarmed by that stat. So now let's talk about the politics of this. So again, a lot of our friends are in prison, and exchanges have been shut down, and everything that Ray and others have dealt with because of Executive Order 14067, which Biden signed in 2022. This executive order authorized the exploration of a CBDC, and it authorized a whole of government approach to cracking down on crypto. And boy, have they been doing that. I mean, this is just, these are just some of the categories from the SEC to the DOJ to the Treasury. Somebody talked earlier about Binance and CZ, the $4 billion that Binance had to pay was the largest settlement ever in the history of the United States Treasury. And of course, the IRS. One other reason you should be concerned about Roger's case is the reason they're going after Roger is the area of the greatest hiring for the IRS right now is crypto enforcement. So if they set this precedent with Roger, we're all gonna have problems. And I spent time on this. I talked to Vivek. He read my book. We actually talked about it a number of times. And then he actually pushed Trump to come out against CBDCs. But do I believe that? No, I don't think that Trump knows what CBDCs are. Again, we already have CBDCs. And to me, the biggest risk that we have right now is complacency, thinking that the Trump administration and this new regime is going to fix things. This should be, I've read the legislation that they've drafted. Everybody celebrates Cynthia Loomis because she has her laser eyes. Read her legislation. The legislation she's proposed would ban algorithmic stablecoins. It would push stablecoins to only the largest financial institutions in the United States. What is a stablecoin issued by a bank? It's programmable digital money. It's indistinguishable from a CBDC. It is a CBDC. So in this index of CBDC tyranny, the Democrats and the Republicans have different approaches, but both are adding to the tyranny index. No one is proposing anything that removes from the tyranny index. And Cynthia Loomis hates privacy. So again, how are we going to get CBDCs? Now I have to say enhanced CBDCs. It will be in an emergency, and it'll get bipartisan support from Republicans and Democrats because they will use terrorism and money laundering. It worked for the Patriot Act. It worked somehow under TARP. They slipped things in there. And, and with COVID, I mean, this is a proven model that works, and there's bipartisan support for this made-up story about money laundering and terrorism. We know that the largest money launderer and terrorist in the world is the United States government itself. Crypto changes none of this. So I've already touched on this. I wrote a long article on this, which I'm going to turn into a book, but I'm trying to explain how you will own nothing to take part of Klaus Schwab's statement. And we've really done this to ourselves, and it starts with click-wrap agreements. So we sign between 150 and 400 click-wrap agreements every year. These user license agreements, you sign up for iTunes, whatever it happens to be. And to give you an idea, nobody reads this stuff. I mean, I have to admit, I don't read it either. And you couldn't, because if the average person read all of these click-wrap agreements, it would take 1 hour a day, 365 days a year, just to read the contracts. The Microsoft user license is 70 pages. Amazon has a 12,000-word condition of terms and services. The Wells Fargo online access, not the full banking agreement, but just the online access, is 30 pages. And to tell you how absurd this is, a doctor recently was eating at a restaurant on a Disney property, had a food allergy and died, and they were trying to use the fact that he had signed a Disney Plus online services agreement to get out of the liability. But the truth is, we've given up our privacy. We've given up our rights to these agreements, and most of us don't even know this. And this has happened with stocks, bonds, everything else. So everything runs on centralized databases right now. Money itself is a centralized database. Each industry has its own unique centralized database with all these middlemen surrounding it, banks, technology partners, lawyers. And in fact, there are going to be an estimated $10.5 trillion lost in economic activity due to cybercrime and database corruption by 2025. So I'm not going to go through all of this other than to say, tokenization isn't necessarily a bad thing. Centralized databases have inherent weaknesses. And there are a lot of middlemen and a lot of hacking and a lot of issues and security issues around that. So tokenization isn't bad, but it can either empower individuals or it can create a complete totalitarian state. And what they're building through regulated liability network and with CBDCs is the complete totalitarian version of this. So there are different types of tokenized money. You have closed systems like Project Hamilton, open systems like Bitcoin, transparent gated systems like stablecoins, privacy-focused open systems, Zeno and Monero, and then the technocracy endgame, which is, again, a global system closed based on energy credits. And you can also tokenize assets in different ways. And I put up here Ravencoin. You can also have Ethereum, which are public permissionless systems. You have permission systems, which is what regulated liability network is. And I want to say the lead developer on the platform for regulated liability network is Mike Hearn, who was also a Bitcoin developer. And then you have Zeno, which does privacy tokens. And so if any of you followed me, you know I'm a big Zeno fan, and I've been talking about it a lot. And I love Monero too. Again, I live on alternative assets. So I primarily use Monero, and I'll talk a little bit more about how I do that. But only 5% of global assets are actually cash. The other 95% are homes, stocks, bonds, and everything else represent an opportunity for tokenization. Have any of you heard of the Great Taking? Okay, good. Well, for those that haven't heard of it, the Great Taking essentially is this. There have been changes made at a contractual level. So actually, let me take a step back. Typically, when you own a stock, you have the ability to vote those shares. That's what it means to be a shareholder. And what's happened over the years is people have bought into these financial instruments, 401ks and everything else. Well, we've already given away, through these contracts, our voting rights. So when people say BlackRock owns all of these companies, no, it's our money, but we've given them the voting rights. Well, something else has happened. Starting in 1994, there were changes made in all 50 states to what's called the Uniform Commercial Code. I won't go through all the details, but the upshot of it is this. The next time there's a major financial collapse, you won't end up owning your stocks. They'll go to the secured creditor of your broker, which, based on the way that it's been designed contractually, will be the 4 largest banks in America. Okay. So the plan here then is implement CBDCs, digitally tokenize all of our assets on the same platform tied to CBDCs, and then when all of these are interconnected globally, flip the switch so that it's backed by energy credits, and then boom, all of a sudden that's how we own nothing. So again, I like huh? Ron Paul, exactly. The revolution will be tokenized, but I think that we need to focus on not only privacy coins for money, but we need to be focusing on the privacy tokenization and trading of assets outside of this centralized system. I'm not going to go through all this, but the total market size for global assets is $1.5 quadrillion. I don't need to go through this. You guys, anybody here think the dollar's going to survive? All right, we'll fast forward. What do these 5 people have in common? Dr. Joseph McCullough, Kanye West, Nicholas Fuentes, Melania Trump, Barron Trump.
Debanked.
Debanked. There you go. Is Bitcoin the answer? No. I would normally play this video. It's a 4-minute video. It's Roger talking for 2 minutes from 2012. This is where I learned about Bitcoin. And then there's 2 minutes by Michael Saylor. And essentially Michael Saylor is now saying that we need to comply with KYC. We need to pay our taxes. Bitcoin shouldn't compete with the dollar, shouldn't compete with the euro, shouldn't compete with MasterCard, shouldn't compete with Visa. That's the new mouthpiece for Bitcoin that people are buying through WEF partner company financial instruments like BlackRock.
Who cares about self-custody, he says now.
He also says, you must be a criminal if you're concerned about self-custody. I'm not sure why this is not. I'm not sure why this is not advancing.
Bitcoin doesn't pass.
That was good. Wait 10 minutes. Oh, that's good, that's good.
All right. Here's the problem. Problem is, according to a recent Cato poll, nearly a third of Gen Z favors the government installing surveillance cameras in the home. So the problem that we have is young people are technologically sophisticated, but they don't believe in privacy. Boomers understand privacy, but have a difficult time using technology. This is the problem. And so I'll summarize the problem. We have technocrats that want a one world currency. The market is focused on Bitcoin that has been hijacked. Governments are pursuing privacy tech, even Republicans. Peer-to-peer use is down dramatically. Only 0.5% of Americans used crypto to buy something last month, down from 2%. There are very few point-of-sale solutions. And merchants are worried about the stability of crypto. So for me, the solution is easy-to-use wallets that are multi-asset with multi-privacy coins, which is why I like and use Cake Wallet now. Easy-to-use multi-asset point-of-sale solutions that include multiple privacy coins, and also, which I'll talk about, a privacy coin that's backed by gold, a stable coin. And we have to be strategic about adoption. So adoption follows a different phase. I know a lot of people that get frustrated because the new thing hasn't gone mainstream right away. The new thing never goes mainstream right away. It goes through a very predictable process. So my wife and I have been to 24 states. We've been all over the place doing these workshops. And I will tell you, you learn a lot in a group of 100 people, 200 people trying to onboard them at once to crypto, how difficult the user experience is. And I don't know if Tuxedo's in here. He's been there from Cake Wallet and some of these things as well. It is a real challenge. So the solution is, just as the technocrats have an end goal of one currency with no other alternatives tied to a social credit system, they're not going to get there all at once. They're getting there in stages. And we're going to get to our end game, I'll call it Galt's Gulch, which is where everybody's using crypto peer-to-peer and they're using privacy coins, but we're not going to get there all at once either. So very quickly, how I live on these alternative assets, I use Cake Wallet, and I use Cake Wallet often to buy gift cards if I'm making retail transactions. I'm in New Hampshire, so New Hampshire is kind of like PorcFest most of the time. So maybe a third of the time in New Hampshire I can actually use crypto peer-to-peer. But whenever I travel, I'm either buying gift cards or I'm buying debit cards or something like that. And I'm going to go through all the specifics of that. I'll send around a link, or I have a link. You can go to daylightfreedom.org and click on Inform, and there's a list that gives an updated tally on what I'm using as I live on these alternative assets. There's also something called Spritz Finance that if you need to, you can actually pay your other bills. You can pay your mortgage, your student loans, why anybody would want to pay that. I don't know, but you can actually connect your Cake Wallet account or your other wallet, and if you need to, offboard your crypto to fiat or even pay your bills directly. Again, this is not the end solution. This is an intermediary point as we move from where we are now to peer-to-peer adoption. I do want to talk about, and this is an announcement that hasn't been made yet, but we've recently onboarded a new merchant called CanaSense. And they take Monero, so I guess this is news. Let me tell you a little bit about CanaSense. They provide access to cannabis and psilocybin wellness for treatment services nationwide in the US. So that is their goal, is to provide access to cannabis and psilocybin. They're compliant with state and federal laws using a very innovative constitutional argument. So they use a combination of telemedicine and other techniques to help connect people. And they had started using crypto early. They had used Bitcoin, but they had problems with it. It was too unpredictable in terms of fees. It was too slow, so they stopped using crypto. So I helped onboard them, and they're now, I guess if you scan this QR code, you can actually sign up for however their process works, but they're now taking Bitcoin, Zano. They will be taking Zano soon as it's integrated with Now Payments, but Zano and Monero. So they're focusing on those three to start. But I want to explain what the process was like so that you can understand the challenges we have with adoption. So I had to set them up with Now Payments, which, if you're familiar with that, it's a payment platform that allows you to take multiple cryptocurrencies, but then it'll convert whatever you take into the single cryptocurrency of your choice. And so he set that up. So he takes these three cryptocurrencies, but then he has it resolved to USDC on Polygon. And then he takes that and puts it into Spritz Finance and offboards it to a bank account so that he can pay his vendors and pay his employees. So this is what the process is today. Again, this is not the ideal that we're looking for, but it does work, and it's one step closer to adoption. And what I'm working on is I'm retooling the entire workshop. And the goal of my workshop, starting in 2025, is we will be able to onboard individuals to crypto for the first time in the workshop. We will also onboard and set up merchants in the workshop, and then structure it so that by the end of the workshop, a newly anointed person to crypto can actually buy something directly from the merchant. Because we need that level of interactivity in order to actually start pushing to the goal that we want, which is peer-to-peer digital cash.
Yes.
So, running out of time here, also working on a privacy gold-backed stablecoin. We can talk about that later. At the end of the day, the way I think we win here, easy-to-use wallets and point-of-sale systems, we need to collaborate. I love Monero, but I think being a maxi, the only thing we should be is freedom maxis.
Yeah.
And if we all work together, I think we can accomplish this. We also need to do a better job of marketing privacy. This whole idea that we're presumed guilty because we want privacy is ridiculous. And we need to, and by the way, all these merchants that have already been debanked with Operation Choke Point 1.0, there are people in the health freedom space, there are people in 20 different merchant categories that have already lost access to banking services. That's our early market adopters that we need to get together and build a solution that then, once the kinks are worked out, we can then take to more of a mass adoption level. So, with that said, happy to take any questions if there's any time.
It's not really a question. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that this stuff's not just happening in the US. In fact, it's far more advanced in Europe and the UK, maybe Canada, Australia, those sorts of places. And actually, Monero is a lot less easy to use in those places. I live here in Mexico, and it's almost impossible to use because it's primarily a cash-based society. So getting Mexican pesos from Monero is really difficult. And actually, all the solutions which you put on there, let's say you wanted to pay for MasterCard with Monero is great if you want to use US dollars, not very good for anything else. So I would say there's a lot more solutions in the US against this than there is anywhere else.
We need you to step up in Australia.
I'm English.
There too.
We need a full court press everywhere, and again, it's not easy. I mean, there's that curve. We've got to move up the freedom index as they're moving up the tyranny index. But you're right, it's a global problem. 64 countries already beyond the research phase of CBDCs and understand their intention is for this to all be integrated globally. You can't run and hide, by the way. The other part of this is, a lot of people think, oh, I can go off in the woods, or even me being part of the Free State Project. We're not going to be able to hide this. You have to fight global technocracy head on.
Yes.
The question, so you've done a lot of onboarding, which I think is the most important thing, like you were saying earlier, getting people to actually start using not just Monero, but all privacy coins in a peer-to-peer way, which is the original intention. It is possible in Mexico, it is happening in different parts of Mexico, but what do you think, would you say are the biggest challenges in general onboarding people, both merchants and individuals, besides just signing them up on a wallet and helping them understand that? Like, what are the biggest challenges you've run into, and any specific advice for people in here who might try to, start that same process of onboarding people in their communities?
Sure. Well, on the wallet front, and I launched this Manhattan project, and the Manhattan project was I was going to build a wallet and a point of sale system if I needed to. I mean, it wasn't my goal, but I knew that we needed a multi-asset approach. And so what I found, sitting in front of large numbers of people at once, I like Cake Wallet because it's easy to use. So I recommend that everybody look at Cake Wallet. It's open source, it's easy to use, it has multiple privacy coins. It has Monero, it was built originally for Monero, it has Zano, it has the ability to buy gift cards within it, there's an exchange built within it. So for right now, I'm excited about Cake Wallet and recommend that. It's particularly based on ease of use and the fact that there's definitely a spirit of focusing on privacy and ease of use. The point of sale thing is incredibly difficult. This is the weakest part of the entire situation. And here's why, here's what happened. You'll see a lot of these maps where somebody says, here are all the retailers that take X crypto. Well, what it was some guy during a bull market went to a business owner and said, hey, would you like to take crypto? And he installed a wallet on his phone and then probably never sold anything. And then if you go to that store, they probably don't take crypto.
Yeah.
So the problem is you need a multi-asset point of sale system. There have been some, but because they're centralized, they're subject to government regulation. BitPay used to be, it still is a large point of sale system, but they're not accepting new merchants, and now they're highly regulated. There was another point of sale system called AnyPay, which was great, easy to use, multiple assets. The same guys that built that had the FBI knock on their door when they went after Ian Freeman, and they left and abandoned the project. So the problem on the point of sale side is we need a solution. I like Now Payments, but I don't think Now Payments is open source. So if anybody wants, I want to build an open source project, and we can actually fork AnyPay. So if anybody's interested in working on that from a development perspective, we need an open source multi-coin wallet. Point of sale system.
I got a question.
In helping people onboard into crypto, a lot of people don't want to do the KYC when they're going from fiat to crypto. Local Monero was a great solution, but unfortunately they closed their doors. Do you have any suggestions? I know hodlhodl.com is still around. I always encourage people to build our own in-person or trust-based peer-to-peer markets, not relying on a website that puts themselves at risk. But do you have any advice on that front?
That one's actually tough, and the problem is, even when you do the person-to-person stuff, you have to make sure that somebody's not a Fed. They certainly set up Ian Freeman. They had somebody in there from the Department of Justice acting like he was, a drug dealer and doing all kinds of things for person-to-person transactions. Right now, the best solution that I have is use a centralized exchange to buy a stablecoin, and then use a service like XLX or some other service that's non-KYC to swap a stablecoin to a privacy coin. This is not an ideal solution, but that's what I recommend right now. But this is the sticking point. The sticking point. By the way, I will say one thing really quickly. People don't own their 401ks. There's $10 trillion worth of money. All these seniors think they have their retirement. on lock with 401ks. They don't own those assets. So I talk to a lot of people that want to sell their 401k and move into privacy coins. It takes a month to do that. From the time you say, I want to sell some of my 401k, to they send you a check in the mail, to you deposit at the bank, to using a centralized exchange to then swap to a privacy coin, it takes a month. So that's just the reality of it.
I have a quick question. I wanted to know, I think a lot of us here know, but maybe if we want to onboard the normies and grow on that, can you give us the quick one sentence or less why CBDCs are dangerous?
CBDCs are dangerous because they're the end of free will. It's complete programmable money that is designed for social engineering, and it's designed to be programmed, tracked, and completely censored. So the arguments that you hear from the technocrats on the other side is about financial inclusion, and it's about all of these other things. It has nothing to do with financial inclusion. You'll have less financial inclusion if you have a CBDC. There are a lot of people that exist just in the cash economy right now. Those people will not be elevated by a CBDC.
So I just want to say one thing about the point of sale thing. The problem isn't just point of sale. It's the fact that even if you're going to buy something from a shop, the supply chain that goes all the way back to things like the raw materials, the metal mines, and all of these different things that make up all the products are all based on the fiat currency. So at some point, whatever privacy coin you're going to use has to be transferred back into a state fiat currency. And that's the point at which the governments will trap them. And that's why you're never going to get the point of sale taken up, basically.
Well, it can work if you start with categories of businesses that, again, are already aware of this. So find people, local farms, find people that are involved in Second Amendment stuff, and get those people together in a group so that now you have a local area of people that are willing to do peer-to-peer. Look, this solution isn't going to work for Costco. Walmart's not going to accept this. And by the way, we don't want them to accept this. They are the technocrats. They are the WMF. What?
Stop giving them your money.
Yeah, stop giving them your money. Ditch the dollar. Or whatever your fiat currency is.
Even right now, dealing with merchants out there, their number one, their first step right after the transaction, is to convert that into fiat, and that's understandable. They gotta pay bills and stuff, which is accepted in fiat. But how do we? I think it's more important for XMR to become the standard they use as currency within each other, where they don't even have to convert it. What are the steps that we need to take to convince everyone else that that's more, that's really what's important here, is that we retain XMR or these privacy coins as the currency between us, and not even have to worry about converting to fiat.
Well, it's like I said, it's that freedom index. So people are going to have to start, even when I show people this, okay, yeah, you're going to start now. Merchant's going to take crypto, they're probably going to convert it, they're going to off-ramp it to a bank and use that to pay the bills, but then actually explain and get them to start trying to find suppliers and other local businesses that are willing to take it directly. So it's going to be a percentage. It's kind of like for me, maybe 30% of my living on alternative currencies is peer-to-peer with people in New Hampshire that have already signed up for this, but the rest of the time I've got to use either gift cards or debit cards. It will work in a progression, not all at once. But start, take the first step. That's why I do these workshops. Just getting one person to buy one thing from somebody directly is a game changer.
Have you looked into things like, Bitcoin Beach, which has now got, I think, a similar project, I think it's about 10 worldwide, which is, from the bottom up, the grassroots, for poor people. Have you looked at that as a way to promote things and make that more successful and spread? Because it works mainly by word of mouth, which is great.
I mean, I've heard mixed things about Bitcoin Beach, but I know the whole experiment in El Salvador is based on Bitcoin. And most of the people in El Salvador have a full custody solution of Bitcoin that can be monitored by the El Salvadorian government. So that's not
Right, but it doesn't have to be, because they've got many other lightning wallets like Moon and stuff that, and it does work locally, and if you could change it so that it does become independent, I think it's a great way to. I was wondering if you'd look into that at all.
Well, I found that trying to get Bitcoin maxis to look outside of Bitcoin is a harder barrier than trying to get somebody new to adopt a privacy coin from scratch. But I take your point about looking into their tactics.
Aaron, do you mind if I help with the answer to this one?
Sure.
So, we're all asking the same question.
Mike for the stream.
May I join you on stage, brother? May I join you?
Come on up.
So I spoke earlier today, but it feels good to have a real friend and a warrior like this. We all want to know the same. I'm a scholar, by the way. The two are inseparable. At least we have our fighting done by fools and our thinking done by cowards. Seneca, dude. So, brother, everyone's asking the same question. How do we jumpstart this thing? There's so many people here doing amazing work on the ground, like this brother Ernesto, and then he's teaching children about Bitcoin, the nature of the scam, the tools we have. It's all amazing, but it's going to take another 10 or 20 years, and we don't have another 10 or 20 years, brother, right?
No, we don't. We have 5 max.
Exactly, 2030. We've both been saying the same thing. So what we really need is someone, that monkey to climb up the tree, who really doesn't care how many people can see his butt, stick his neck out, and really support the core tools. We will be supporting Monero soon. No one's will be supporting Monero. Since everyone banned it, we'll be supporting it. It's already on our spot exchange, but it's when it comes to the wallet that is the key. And the truth is, asking people to self-custody for something from the jump is an impossible task. It really is, right? You have to just accept that. There needs to be some level of centralized control. People want some recourse. That is the truth, right?
Well, I mean, people are, if we have an easy enough solution, I mean, the problem has been
Accessibility.
self-custody has been difficult, but self-custody is possible.
Definitely is possible. There's just a lot more education that needs to happen. And it's like a relationship, right? Coming up to someone from the scratch and saying, hey, you got a self-custody from the jump. It's like coming up to a girl and just asking her to marry you on the spot. It doesn't really work that way. It needs to be a bit of massaging done. And that's where I come in. I'm not saying I'm the right ointment, but I'm definitely giving the massage. No one's will be supporting Monero soon on our wallet. And I invite everyone else in the world to do so, to bring back Monero, and that is the test. That's why I'm here, folks, all dressed up, making this an atmosphere of my man over here. We gotta be willing to stick our necks out. They're never gonna invite us to the cool table. We don't wanna be cool. We're cool with that, not being cool. And I'm cool with the risk. I'm cool with all of that. And I challenge every other CEO to do that. We need more companies that are going to do that. I'll put all of our resources at no one's to educate people and bring them on to this Monero economy. It's the way it has to be. Because look, I've made a bit critical mistake up until now, right? You guys will hear all my tweets talking about, oh yeah, the West is banned, and this and that. You can't blame all your problems on a direction, right? The problem is I haven't really chosen my allies. I've chosen my enemy. I know who my enemy is, but I haven't chosen my allies. So I'm going fully dark. You can put whatever adjective you want on that. But to be fully sovereign means you're all in. No more waddling around in the gray area. I'm going all in, brother. Thank you for the support.
Thank you.
All right. That was intense. All right, guys.
Yeah, Aaron! Woo!
Great. Thank you, man. Fantastic.
Very fast.
I did not want to break that up, but we have to keep on schedule because we get kicked out of here at 7 o'clock. So we got to keep it moving. And as amazing as that just was, what's coming up will